We are pleased to welcome Dr. Aleksandra Drecun.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Aleksandra. You can find her at www.a4ct.com.
Stands for Association for Compassionate Transformation.
And compassionate transformation, that's an interesting term. Can you explain it?
Yeah, so in my line of work, I found that in terms of getting people to where they want to be with their personal goals, goal setting and fulfilling their fullest potential, that the process has to be compassion, honoring where the person's at and the struggles that they've been through and the ones that they're encountering. And so I think a very gentle, compassionate approach is the one that's needed in order to kind of meet the client where they're at.
Why do you suppose, by the way, that heartbreak is so profound in how it affects us as compared to some of the other issues?
We have this innate need to connect. And when there's a rupture in that connection, or what we call an attachment in psychology, that bond, it can be really devastating for people. And it creates a whole host of changes within the brain in terms of how the brain functions. And then we feel that manifests on a mental and emotional level. It can feel like death for people when they have heartbreak or a breakup.
And we do hear that grief is very much related, and we hear about the stages of grief and many of the ways in which, if we look at this in a grieving sense, that may help us along. Do you find that the 5 stages of grief are useful?
They can be, because I think people experience grief in different ways. There isn't a one size that fits all. However, we have our own process in which we grieve, and that takes time. And so there isn't a set way to grieve. It's individual and personal for each person. But we do need to go through that process of feeling and processing our emotions in order to make sense of the situation and bring meaning to our lives so that we can move on and learn and grow from the experience.
And self-worth, which is our topic tonight, and how it affects us in our relationships and how we can look at our relationships and almost pinpoint where some of them have gone wrong as pertains to our own self-worth. When we come into this world, Dr. Drecun, when we come into this world, what's our level of self-worth right out of the womb? And then what happens from there?
Well, the self-worth is created because when you think about it, when you think about this precious newborn, this baby being born, there isn't anything that this child is doing to feel worthy. But yet we bend over backwards to ensure that that child has a sense of safety, a sense of security with having all of their needs met. So when that baby cries because they're hungry, they're wet, or they need to be cuddled, or they don't feel good, we as caregivers respond right away. We want to take the aches and pains away, no matter what they are. And so this child starts to build this sense of self-worth and trust in the world because their needs are being consistently met, yet they're not doing anything to earn that, right? So a child learns to establish that early on, and this is part of how attachment's formed as well. But this is the whole point of self-worth. It's something that we're born with. It's a human birthright. Isn't anything that we need to do or accomplish in our lives in order to have it. It's an intrinsic value that's there from birth, but we lose contact or connection with it or access to it because of the way that society sends these messages that our self-worth is based on accomplishing certain things, having certain statuses. And so we start to confuse our self-worth with our self-esteem.
We come into this world and we're affected by all of the messages around us and by child rearing, by our caregivers. You mentioned attachments. But at what point do we start to develop our own sense of self-worth along the way?
It's a hard one. I think that in my practice and the people that I work with, it's a major problem of self-worth because I think that we have internalized those societal standards, and people come in and they have all these wonderful things going on in their lives. A lot of areas of their lives are intact, yet they're still unhappy. And they can't pinpoint what it is. And they come in with the idea that if they do X, Y, and Z, their mental health is going to improve. And that's the problem. We know from the research that as humans, we poorly predict what's going to make us happy. And in fact, we pursue the things that we think that are going to make us happy, and they don't. And so I think that, sometimes coming into therapy or having an epiphany or having a situation where people are enlightened because of a certain experience, they start to reprioritize and they start to rethink the things that they used to believe in terms of making them have a sense of self-worth or contentment or satisfaction in life. And I think therapy can be one of those things, but I think that we are trained in a way or conditioned in a way to not really think about self-worth so much, but to really focus more on self-esteem and how we attain that by things that are external to ourselves, rather than turning inward and looking at our own personal value and using that as a foundation in which we move through time and space throughout our lives.
And what's the difference between self-worth and self-esteem?
Great question. So self-esteem and self-worth are terms that oftentimes are used in the same way, but they are different. Self-esteem is more about, when we think about esteem, we think about regard, right? Our regard of oneself or regard of another, the esteem. And it's built on reputation, and we oftentimes evaluate ourselves when we're looking at self-esteem. So we're judging ourselves based on what we do or didn't do, or what we accomplished or didn't accomplish, if we were a success or a failure. And it's oftentimes based on things outside of us. So other people's approval, or attaining certain things, or attaining certain goals. Our self-worth is having a belief in ourselves that we have an intrinsic value that isn't based on these external things. And it's more focused on the qualities that tend to be internal, such as kindness, loving, compassionate, having integrity, being honorable. And these, sadly, are really important qualities that we as a society don't focus so much on. I think we're starting to focus on those things a little bit more, but it hasn't been the basis for our identities or the way that we base how we feel about ourselves in terms of self-esteem.
So self-worth is not situational, right? Self-worth is something that sticks with us throughout the experiences that we have, correct?
Correct.
But does it change?
It can stay stagnant for a long time if we're not aware of it. And it can be fixed for a long time if we don't look at it and engage in introspection and kind of really see, how do we really feel about ourselves? And when we don't have this sense of self-worth, we carry around a lot of shame. And because of that shame, we start to feel that we're not worthy of connection with others. And when that happens, we start to look towards others or towards other things to give us that sense of self-worth. But that's something that's never going to fill us. We have to fill ourselves in that way in terms of giving us ourselves our own sense of self-worth. And the only way of doing that is to really value ourselves, love ourselves as we are, accept ourselves, while still working on becoming progressive and growing as humans.
Now, you're not surprised, I would imagine, at all by the fact that many members in our Exaholics community, when they have a problem or when they feel really lost after a breakup, after a relationship ends, and seem to take longer maybe than some others might take to get over the grief and the pain of it, you wouldn't be surprised to know that many members in our community also at the same time have maybe some other issues and other factors in their lives that they're unhappy about, whether it is where they are in their lives at the time, how they feel about themselves, whether or not they feel they're attractive, and the list goes on. That probably doesn't surprise you after all you've just said.
No, because we have this filter, we have this lens in which we view the world. And if we're lacking in self-worth, we're going to engage in a type of a confirmation bias, so that when information comes into us, we're going to interpret it through that lens. And that lens is based on our self-worth. And so when we don't get feedback that we want, it's very easy to say, well, it's me, I'm the problem. And because they think something is deficient with them or they're defective in some way, they're looking at fixing that. And it's always an outward fix. What can I do that's outside of myself to make myself better, rather than taking a look inward and figuring out, well, what is my value? how do I deal with this in a situation that still gives me a sense of value as a human being, as I am valuable? And so we start to try to find solutions that aren't really going to fix the core problem, which is why sometimes people get very stuck in dealing with grief or breakups or relational difficulties, because they're thinking it's them. And, we're all responsible. We have a part of responsibility in our relationships with others. But sometimes if that self-worth isn't there, we're not really evaluating things in a healthy, balanced way.
Now, you mentioned stuck, and I want to keep following up on this point. So when a person feels the way they do about themselves, and it's not altogether a positive feeling, and this is after their breakup, where the breakup may have been a catalyst to feeling even worse than they did, and maybe the relationship kind of held it together for them because maybe it gave them something to feel some self-worth over, meaning that the relationship itself became their value proposition, right? What can be said to actually connect with that person? What kinds of approaches do you use besides just the logic of it all to get them to actually see the problem or see what's causing this and how to sort of get at it in a proactive way without feeling like they can't relate?
This is a very humanistic lens in which to view human beings or human nature. And, I think when somebody's in a lot of pain and they're hurting, and a lot of times they're going to sometimes even engage in self-deprecation because of it, because as you've mentioned, we oftentimes put our self-worth in others because we're lacking it in ourselves. And when that person is no longer in our life, we can't stand on our own 2 feet because our self-worth has been put onto somebody else and that person is gone now. And so we lost ourselves with them. And so I think that, you can use a logical approach, and that helps on an intellectual level, on a cerebral brain level. But there's also the part of the heart, and it needs to connect both mind and heart into one. And so I think these humanistic approaches that really focus on, self-worth, unconditional love, unconditional regard, where we nurture our relationship with ourselves, that's the key to repairing that so that people can heal and recover and become a better version of themselves because of their experience.
We have a question from username Rough Life. What are some productive ways to work on gaining self-worth and our relationship with ourselves?
I think that there's a lot of methods to facilitate that enhancement or growth of one's personal self-worth. And I think people have to utilize methods that resonate with them. But I think, solitude is key. And when I say solitude, it's very different from loneliness. It's not about being alone, but actually cultivating and nurturing a relationship with yourself. This is the most important relationship of our lives, because we start, we come into this world by ourselves, and we're going to leave this world by ourselves. And so you can do that through journaling, you can do it through meditation, you can do it through spiritual practices. There's a lot of methods, writing about self-worth. What does it mean to one? Starting to define that, starting to make it more of a concrete, tangible thing for one. And then just engaging in types of behaviors or even thought processes that nurture that sense of self-worth, where we say, I do have value, and I'm going to act in ways that make me feel as a value person. And I'm going to think in a way that's going to make me feel valued. And I'm going to nurture myself in ways that make me feel valued, whether it's through healthy relationships, having boundaries with people who can be unhealthy at times. And so just really starting to say, you know what, I am a valuable person. I'm here for a reason. I'm meant to be here. And how am I going to change my life so that I'm doing things that are congruent with my own personal intrinsic value?
When you say we're here for a reason, I know it's beyond, it can be seen as religious, philosophical, practical. It can have so many different meanings. How can somebody who feels a low degree of self-worth connect to that statement that I am here for a reason? How can you convince that person who may not feel that way?
Yes, so that's a great question. And sometimes that can be done individually by a person kind of just moving in that direction of trying to foster and nurture self-worth through these other techniques that I mentioned, of either journaling, meditation, writing, thinking in a way that's positive about themselves as having value, acting in a way that adheres to that philosophy or that belief system. But sometimes, a person can't get there alone, and it's helpful to seek out professional help, work with somebody, or even nurture a relationship that's very healthy, where the person is mirroring back to that individual, you are of value. You need to make choices in your life that are going to reflect that value. You need to make decisions in your life based on that value. And I think when we start to connect with our own personal value, we get a clearer picture in terms of, why are we here? What's the point of it all? And I think,
what is the point of it all, by the way?
I cannot have the answer for everyone. I think that I can have the answer for myself, but I do believe at some level that we're all here for the purpose of connection and personal growth or evolution, however that looks for each individual. They've done some mathematical calculations based on, what's the likelihood of a person, let's just say of you being here in this universe today. And it was like something in the trillions. So this isn't chance. It's a very rare thing that each of us are here uniquely as we are for a reason. And we have to figure out what that reason is. And it might be multiple reasons, but I do believe that we're here to connect at a higher level and also to do something, to accomplish something. And so whatever that may be, hopefully we're each leaving behind, a positive legacy for somebody else, and I think that we each have to figure out what that is.
Some say that the highest form of contentment and pleasure in life is actually having a purpose. Mm-hmm. Do you find that purpose, a sense of purpose, and self-worth are connected in some way?
Absolutely.
And what can you say about that?
So I think that, sometimes with our purpose can be based on, ourselves or others. But I think when we have this sense of value, when we love ourselves for who we are, we're able to give that love more freely to others. I think when we're connected to why we're here, we're able to facilitate those purposes or make those purposes happen in a way that your value, and you know how to manifest that value in this lifetime. And so when we have that sense of self-worth, we connect at a much deeper level with others because we're not afraid of being authentic. We're not afraid of letting our guard down. We're not afraid of being vulnerable. We're not afraid as much of being judged because we know our own personal value and we can be very real with another.
Jobette says, just from listening, I do think that much of my self-esteem was based on my ex. So now what? The shifting, doctor, from self-esteem that is derived from the ex as the source, to pivot away from that and to become one's own fountain of self-esteem, right? Or to find it in other ways, is a challenge. What would you say to someone who comes to you, as Jobette is saying right now, look, this is happening to me. My self-esteem was entirely wrapped in this person. This just happened. What do I do right now? Great
question. So, have our self and others, as I said, because we'll be on a slippery slope. It'll be good when it's good, and then when things are hard, it's going to be hard. And so we're going to find that our mood and the way that we see ourselves vacillates. There isn't that sense of stability or foundation there. And so really, when somebody moves out of our lives for whatever reason, it allows us to reshift our focus on ourselves. And that's never going to go away. So the person that you can always count on or trust is ourselves. And so we're always going to be available to ourselves. And I think we as people, we underestimate our own personal power, our ability to be intuitive, to know what we naturally need, to know that we have this higher sense of self or this inner wisdom or guide within us that knows what we need, that's going to get us to a place where we can become better people or be better versions of ourselves. And I think we have to learn to trust that again. And the only way to do that is going back to that idea of fostering that relationship with ourselves, taking out time to create this, to strengthen this relationship with ourselves. You know, we put in so much effort to make time for our friends and our families, but I don't see people putting in so much effort in terms of fostering their relationship with themselves. And I think solitude is a really important part of that. And I think if we can start to focus about how we feel about ourselves and how we value ourselves outside of others, not to say that you know, our relationships with others aren't important, they are, but I think our foundation has to be given to ourselves.
So you brought up solitude, and that's another thing, is how we view solitude. So some of us may view solitude and being lonely after a breakup as just a further incarnation of the low that we feel, in that we're alone, and not only did we lose this person, but we're alone, and there's really no connection in the world that's happening for us at this time, and it almost reminds us of our shortcomings to some of us. But based on what you're saying, it sounds like we need to look at solitude in a whole different way in order to be able to appreciate what solitude offers us, and that is a chance to have this connection. And can you talk about solitude as a positive?
Absolutely. So solitude is different from feeling lonely. It's a time when we have a peaceful moment to ourselves to reflect on the things that we want to think about, that we think are important to us and that are related to us, to our lives, to our personal wellness, to our growth. And it's really that time to foster that relationship with ourselves. And so we want to carve out time for solitude where we can just sit down, be with ourselves, be with our thoughts, be with our feelings, be with our sensations, and really think, where am I today? You know, how do I feel about myself? How do I start to value myself in a healthy way? What can I do differently to continue to grow as a human being? And we want to use this time as a personal growth time. This is a time where we dedicate to ourselves to be better people, to fulfill our fullest potential or realize our potentials.
So when you talk about journaling, during these times of solitude would be a good time for us to start writing this down. How am I feeling right now? How do I feel about myself right now? What are the ways in which I would like to improve, right? To really like take the time specifically and say, this is my time of solitude. I'm going to use this time to really write out my thoughts and journal out my thoughts. And what do we do with those thoughts after we've written them down?
I think it's important to create some intentions in the sense that, what do I want to take away from my writing? What do I want to work on? What do I want to take into my life and actually practice or apply? You know, whether it's being more accepting of ourselves, being more loving of ourselves, doing things that, you know, are in congruence with our values that we have. And so I think that we have to not just think about it, but we have to live it. We have to breathe it. We have to walk it. We have to talk it. We have to live it as it being our truth. And I think when we start to do that, we really start to feel this deep sense of connection with ourselves, this sense of love that we have with ourselves. And when you have that level of depth of love with oneself, and I don't mean in a narcissistic way, but a really healthy and balanced way, we can give that to others. And so we're not just better for ourselves, we're also better able to serve others in that same way. We bring more love, we bring more joy, we bring more authenticity to our relationships. And I think as a result, that makes people a lot happier.
And perhaps we could also write about what you said, which is that we have this capacity as human beings that we don't fully understand how powerful it might be. And you're saying that the power that we have to overcome is really amazing. The power to transform, like we have that capacity, we just have to access it.
Yes, we just have to light that fire. That fire is there. We are, as humans, we are so innately intelligent and so able to be adaptive and resilient and overcome adversity. And I think that we have to really tap into our ability to heal and grow. And when we do, when we start to cultivate that within ourselves and focus on that, we can do some really incredible things. I mean, just think about the amazing things that humans have done that even have gotten us to this point in our lives, the things that they create, that they innovate, that all comes from a place of, this ability to kind of light a fire and believe in oneself. And I think when we can do that, we can see really amazing things happen in our lives and then appreciate them at that level.
And one final thought on that, one final follow-up is to believe in ourselves. It sounds fantastic when we hear it, believe in ourselves. But for those of us who are so far removed from that feeling, just sort of wouldn't even know where the believing in ourselves bus stop is to even get on it, so to speak. How do we bring ourselves to actually be able to start even believing in ourselves when that pain is there and we just don't know how do we access it? We know it's a good idea, but we want to access it.
Well, if there's a lot of pain there, I think processing that first is going to be important. And I think it's a lot easier to deal with that, trying to improve believing in oneself when we've kind of dealt with whatever is right in front of us. The brain is not very good at multitasking, doing too many things at once. So whatever's most important in that person's life, and if they're dealing, say, with a breakup or some kind of personal hardship, it's better to address that first. And then once that is been dealt with, then to really take some time out and some space and focus on really starting to trust oneself, to believe in oneself. And, some people can do that on their own, as I said, through journaling or reading or meditation or spiritual practices, whatever might resonate with that individual. And some people might need a little bit more help. Even healthy relationships can be healing in that way. But the key is that we internalize that. If we're getting it from a relationship, we internalize it and we make it our own, so that if that person is no longer in our life, we're still able to keep that sense of self-worth, whether that person is there or not.
The next question comes from W Woman, and W Woman's question is going to revolve around circumstances in her life. And we just want to caution when we respond to WW Woman is that we don't know all of the circumstances and all of the variables. So WW Woman will ask the doctor to answer the question in a general sense as opposed to specific to your specific situation. So with that, here's the question. I've never had low self-esteem until now. I had an affair. I'm staying with my husband, and the person I had the affair with is staying with his wife. I've never felt this low in my life. Why is my self-worth at an all-time low based on one relationship that I wasn't prepared to give up? And so generally speaking, doctor, things happen in life, a situation like this, and suddenly someone who spent her whole life feeling terrific and not having low self-esteem suddenly gets hit with self-worth so low that she's having a very difficult time snapping out of it. Can self-worth really just all of a sudden hit us that way? Can we really just have a crash after having maybe decades of high self-worth?
Well, I think that it depends. It depends on the person. But, I think that there's maybe perhaps some kind of personal self-judgment going on. And with that, it's very easy to confuse, as I said, self-esteem with self-worth. Not to say that our worth won't be questioned, but our self-esteem could be impacted perhaps maybe because we feel like we've done something that goes against our core values. However, even when we make mistakes as humans, because we are fallible and we have to make mistakes, otherwise we won't grow. There's no opportunity to learn from our mistakes and become better. But, this is obviously really bothersome to this woman, and I can understand why. But maybe this is really a time to kind of really reconsider, where was your self-worth before? Maybe you thought it was intact because the self-esteem was masking the self-worth, but maybe it wasn't at the place that she had originally thought it was at. Not to say that we wouldn't struggle through something like this and making mistakes, but perhaps it's more that her self-esteem was intact more so than her self-worth. There could be possibly shame being experienced as a result of what has transpired. And if there is shame, that's very erosive of self-worth, and that could have been there before, not even knowing it.
And the fact is, if we want to get better, we have our work cut out for us, right? We're always, I always wonder about this because we say it often enough, but just to reconfirm it with you, Doctor, self-worth is not an all or nothing proposition. We're works in progress. We're working on self-worth all of our lives. We'll never have all the self-worth there is for ourselves to have, right?
Right. We're under construction for the rest of our entire lives. And so it's something that we're always developing and working on. It's not a black and white type of a situation. It's something that's on a spectrum, obviously, with some people being at the higher or the lower end or somewhere in the middle. But it is something that we have to continuously work on. Once we have it, it doesn't mean that we get to stop working and not work at it anymore in order to maintain it. It's just like exercise. If you want to continue to be healthy, you have to continuously maintain that health and that wellness. And we have to do the same in terms of our emotional health too.
We're all growing. We all have our challenges, no matter who we are on the spectrum, correct?
Absolutely. No matter how educated, how trained we are, even as professionals in the field, we're definitely not perfect by any means, and we're flawed just like anybody else. And yes, I do think as a professional, especially, I think it's important to lead by example and do our own personal work. Important. I think that it's a privilege and it's an honor to do this type of work, to work with people so intimately. We often are privy to information that people are not willing to share with anybody else because of the safety of the space that therapy offers. And, I really value and admire the courage that it takes for somebody to sit on my couch every single day and to do the work that this entails. And so I take it very seriously. I'm very honored to be able to be a part of somebody's journey. And as a result, I feel that I owe it not just to my clients, but also to myself, that if we're going to ask people to do this hard work, we need to be asking ourselves to do it too. I can't sit here and say, do this, and I'm not willing to do it myself. I don't think it's fair, and I don't think it's right. And yes, I am working on my own self-worth every single day. There's things that happen that trigger that for me, just like it would for anybody else, and I have to work on it actively as well.
And on that note, we want to say thank you to Dr. Aleksandra Drecun, who was kind enough to spend the time with us today. And you can find her at www.A4CT.com, which stands for Association for Compassionate Transformation. If you want to get in touch with her, that's the way to do it. Thanks for your time, Doctor. We enjoyed the session.
It's my honor and pleasure. Thank you so much.